Hello and welcome back to the Life on the Wrist podcast. As you probably noticed, last week we were missing in action. There was not a Life on the Wrist episode that was released last week, but to be completely honest with you, there really wasn't a whole lot of watch news to discuss, and I didn't really want to create a podcast just to, continue the weekly uploads. I really want to make sure that when we do upload a podcast, there is meaningful content that we are discussing and interesting news that happened. Not that nothing happened in the last week, but I want to make sure that I have sufficient amount, information or sufficient news to really make it a whole episode of the podcast for you. So we skipped last week, but this week we've got a couple stories that we want to go through, and I think the stories are pretty relevant, pretty interesting, and hopefully you enjoy them. We'll also continue the From the Archives sort of series that we started in the last episode of the Life from This podcast. I think we got some good reception from that, and hopefully we can continue the interesting news that comes from some of the previous videos and articles that we wrote for Life on the Wrist. We'll also cover two watches that you'll likely see on the channel over the next several weeks. There are something modern, something vintage. So hopefully you'll get a little bit of a sneak preview on what we'll end up covering over the next several weeks. So I'll start off with the first bit of news, which is the Horological Society's 2025 Gala is taking place on Saturday, March 22nd. And if reading directly from the website, the annual charity auction plays a vital role in supporting the future of watchmaking education. 100% of the proceeds raised from the thing that we're going to be discussing today goes to ongoing education initiatives, including supporting watchmaking students with scholarships. And what I want to discuss is their auction the charity auction that they are going to be hosting. The annual auction is supported by Christie's, Phillips, and Sotheby's, and is hosted in a rotating format. And for 2025, the auction will be hosted by Christie's. And I want to say, maybe not this last week, but I think the week before that, the lots for the auction have been released. And I wanted to quickly just go through each of the lots, but as always, there will be a link in the show notes of this podcast to where you can see the lots. You also are able to place absentee bids and purchase gala tickets if you are able to go. So the first lot is a custom safari jacket donated by the Armory, which is pretty nice. Armory has had a long-standing relationship with HSNY, and so makes sense why this is lot number one. Lot number two is a Reverso Discovery Workshop donated by Juju Lecoultre, where it's basically a private 6-seat Reverso Discovery Workshop where you have the opportunity to explore the world of watchmaking in a new way, where it's kind of blends sort of the academic education as well as these hands-on experience you can get in watchmaking. It's hosted by an instructor and a technical expert, and you're able to deep dive into the Reverso archives and go hands-on with a couple of their models. Lot 3 is a cool one. It's New York Knicks tickets with Eric Wind, and if you don't know Eric Wind, get to know him. Wind Vintage is a huge part of the vintage watch world, but he's also had previous roles as at companies like Christie's. He was served as the vice president senior specialist for Christie's. So and he's a huge basketball fan, so kind of a cool lot there. Lot 4 is an Oris Pro Pilot altimeter watch with and with that you'll get 4 premium New York Yankees tickets that was donated by Oris. Lot 5 is a 444 limited edition racing chronograph watch donated by Brooklyn Watch Company. Lot 6 is a Heuer Zolo Air Sports watch. I don't know much about their pieces, but it was donated by Lyrique Group. Lot 7 is quite a cool one as well. It's a dinner with Jean-Claude Biver that was donated by Biver Watches. Lot 8 is a Omakase experience with Chef Yasuki Nakazawa, which was donated by Grand Seiko. And then lot 9 is a signed chronomètre Souverain wall clock that's donated by FP Journe. It's one of those large ones that you've probably seen, those large sort of Rolex or Audemars Piguet clocks that you'll see maybe in airport lounges or something like that. This one is a 41 centimeter version. The clock is also signed by FP Journe. And then lot 10, which I think is the most coveted, is the lifetime HSNY membership card that is made and donated by Memoria Tenica. That's a really special lot, and every single year many people look to participate in that specific lot. As I mentioned sort of in introing this, and it's listed, it's written on their website, what's really great about this auction is that every single dollar that is raised goes to HSNY's ongoing education initiatives, and it basically keeps the watchmaking trade, watchmaking art alive. And I think it's such an important part if you are interested in watches and and you find this as a hobby or are someone who wants to support this craft. It plays such an amazing and vital role in ensuring that watches stick around and we have the opportunity to enjoy them in years to come. So check out the link in the description. As I mentioned, you can place absentee bids, and if you were there in person, be sure to have your bidding paddle ready. Okay, the next thing I want to discuss is the new releases from Audemars Piguet, which is kicking off their 150th anniversary. So if you don't know, Audemars Piguet is celebrating their 150th anniversary as a company, which is a very special thing to accomplish. It goes without saying, but being in business for such a long time and maintaining a brand for so many years is not something that should be scoffed at. It's not something that should be underappreciated or undervalued. And to mark this special anniversary for the brand, they have released a few new watches. The first thing that they released was a new perpetual calendar. It's the caliber 7138. This is a movement that they have designed where, really interestingly, all adjustments can be made by the crown. A lot of the times in perpetual calendars, you'll have certain places on the watch where you'll be able to adjust certain complications. This one you're able to adjust just by the crown. Really incredible looking movement, and this movement is going to be in 3 different models. There's a Royal Oak in steel with the reference 26674ST. It's going to be in the Royal Oak Sand Gold, which is the 26674SG. And then it will also be in one of the Code 1159s. It's the reference 26494BC. What's really nice is this movement is being used across the range, obviously in the Royal Oaks, but also in the Code 1159, which I think is quite nice, and continues from a technical perspective what Audemars Piguet is capable of doing. So that was the first one. They also had sort of a farewell to the caliber 5135, which is the previous perpetual calendar, and what they released was a Royal Oak Perpetual Calendar Open Work 150th Anniversary Limited Edition that is in a run of 150 pieces, and it has an incredible skeletonized dial with blue sort of accents throughout the dial. It looks really, really nice. And it is everything that a perpetual calendar from in a Royal Oak design looks like, what it speaks to. It takes a lot of its inspiration from a 90s open work perpetual calendar pocket watch, the reference 25729PT, and has a lot of the similar design elements. Obviously the perpetual calendar design, but also sort of the blue accents that are throughout the watch. A really beautiful example, and a wonderful, wonderful way to celebrate this very famous perpetual calendar. Because, you know, when I really think back, I think Audemars Piguet perpetual calendars, there was a movement, and I think it was led by these watches, and I think it was led by Audemars Piguet and their perpetual calendar, Royal Oaks. You know, putting such a high complication movement in what would be described as a sports watch is, you could call it counterintuitive, but it's a very important moment for the brand, and I think they led the way in doing this. And a lot of other brands did very similar watches. I know, you know, I think the Vacheron Constantin Overseas is another great example. But there was definitely a movement, and I think it's important to pay tribute to it. Another thing that they released was a few more editions of the Code 1159. The first one is a 41 millimeter Code 1159 chronograph in white gold with a Tuscan blue dial and blue ceramic mid case, which I really love the mid case, the way that it looks. Kind of looks like a sandwich blued case. I'm a huge blue watch fan. I love blue dials. I love blue case, blue accents where you can have them, and it's a perfect watch as you sort of gear up for the summer, and you know you'll be spending time likely by some sort of body of water, whether that's the ocean or a lake or something like that. It's a nice watch to have on the wrist during that time. We'll speak about another blue watch just soon, but we'll continue to sort of go through the pieces for Audemars Piguet at this moment. They've also released a Code 1159, or I guess it's the RD number 3 caliber 2968, which is in the Code 1159 in sand gold. It's the reference 26665SG. And it's got a really interesting sort of sand-toned dial with a circular finishing, tourbillon at 6 o'clock. And then you also have these brilliant cut diamonds that are on the lugs of the watch, and I think also on the crown. They've also released a three-hander 1159 with a date, as well as a chronograph version of these watches that are made in sort of this shades of gray and accents of blue throughout, but really the gray is the main focus. They're really attractive. I like the way that this line of watches has developed over time, and you know, they've kind of continued the momentum for the Code 1159 line of watches with these releases. The last thing that they released during the sort of launch event was a Royal Oak offshore chronograph. A couple versions. So the first is the reference 26420CE, which is what the brand calls a three-tone case, a black ceramic mid case, a green ceramic bezel, pushers and crown, and then titanium accents in the crown guards and end links. So that's one of the versions. They also came out with I think a green version of these black ceramic pieces, which I think is quite nice, and definitely a cool couple of releases if you're into sort of the offshores from Audemars Piguet. It's a very special moment for the brand. I think they have launched some nice pieces that celebrate this moment. I would say the perpetual calendar is probably the standout, being that it is moving the brand forward in terms of innovation, and is an important step. I'll be interested to see as the year continues, because we're only in sort of the first quarter of 2025, if Audemars Piguet releases some additional pieces for the celebration of their 150th anniversary. All right, the next sort of section that I want to talk about is about a brand called Moser. They have launched a new Streamliner tourbillon with a skeleton boutique edition for the opening of a new US boutique. So last month, Moser announced its first US-based boutique, They kind of already had a presence in the U.S. They sort of launched this presence in New York City in 2023 when they launched what they call Moserland, which was essentially not a boutique, but it was a private showroom and sort of lounge where they could host individuals who were interested in their watches, but it also acted as the Moser office in the US. They have now launched their first boutique, which is based in they announced this launch. It's going to be in Silicon Valley in the San Francisco Bay Area, and they're partnering with a local retailer called Steven Silver Fine Jewelry. For this launch, they also have a new boutique exclusive streamliner, which is the Streamliner Tourbillon Skeleton. They've made a couple of these, but this time it's in yellow gold. It's, as you know, the streamliners are 40 millimeters in diameter with a really, I'd say, really bright yellow gold case that houses the HMC 814 caliber, which is an automatic movement that features Moser's trademark double hairspring and oversized 1 minute flying tourbillon at 6 o'clock. 72 hours of power reserve, really beautifully finished, and really beautiful architecture in the skeletonized movement. It's quite a piece. It's going to only be produced in a limited run of 17 pieces, and obviously is an important launch for the brand as they are moving into the retail space in this in the US. Quite a cool piece. I love the Streamliner. I've been a big advocate for it ever since it was released, and I think it's one of the coolest watches that one can purchase. It's interesting, I think that's what's really important to me. Again, there will be links in the show notes if you want to see the pictures of this watch. I encourage you to check that out, especially because I think the reason why I said it's quite a bright yellow gold case is the fact that the bracelet is also in yellow gold, and so you've got the case, but also this integrated bracelet that is really revolutionary and it's going to stand out for sure. Okay, so don't really have any more news to go over, so we'll shift to the next topic of discussion, and we'll go through our article from the archives of lifeonthewrist.com. This time I wanted to actually pay tribute to a watch that I have always loved. It was the first vintage watch that I ever purchased, and continues to be a watch that I go back to and I have so much enjoyment in wearing. I also think, as we had daylight savings just recently, and with that taking place, I think spring is on the way. The weather's getting a little bit warmer. I'm in the northern hemisphere, so the weather's getting a little bit warmer, and it gives us an opportunity to start getting excited for summer. And so the article that I am pulling out of the archives for this week's episode of the Life on the Wrist podcast is called Watch Stories, the 1973 Memo Time Memo Sale. This article was released on November 4th in 2017. So this goes back a very, very far way. This is, the first year that Life on the Wrist had ever started, which is pretty incredible to think that, once September rolls around, we'll be at 8 years of Life on the Wrist. But what I go through is this really beautiful 1973 memo sale, which was my first vintage watch purchase. And the reason why I featured it on the channel was it had a really cool story to it. So I encourage you to read it, but what was really cool is sort of the back history of it, who owned it before I ended up purchasing it. And there's a cool bit of history of someone who actually wore it during regattas, which are yacht timers are meant to be worn during those times. And I'll be completely frank, I am wearing a memo sale today because I just love the fact that this blue dial gives you it gets me excited for the summers, because it reminds me of, you know, being on the water, being on some sort of lake or ocean, or you know, with the sun coming down, and maybe a nice drink, and just taking in the beautiful weather and beautiful environments we're able to see. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent here, but I encourage you to read it. We've also covered at length. We've covered sort of the history of the memo sale. It'll likely be one of the recommended or the related posts that you'll see on the website if you go to the link. It's just called The History of the Memo Sale Yacht Timer, and you'll be able to see that as well. So I hope you enjoy that article from the archives, and I hope you enjoy the video that accompanies the article as well. All right, so moving forward to some of the watches that you'll likely be seeing on Life on the Wrist over the next several weeks. We've got two watches that we're going to be covering. The first is, in my opinion, one of the best Rolex models that you can purchase as a first-time Rolex buyer, and that is the Rolex Oyster Perpetual Date Explorer 2, reference 16570. The version that we are going to be covering is 16570T, which is a black dial version, and the watch that the specific watch that we're going to be looking at is from 2004. It's an F serial number, so that's sort of 2003-2004 time period for Rolex production. As I mentioned, I think it's one of the best Rolex models that you can purchase. You have everything from a second time zone hand, which gives you an added complication as well as a date. But it also has a case that I think fits into the modern era of watch collecting really well. And it has less lineage than maybe some other GMT watches or I guess 2 time zone watches that you can get from Rolex, but it's a nice entry into exploring this sort of part of Rolex collecting. Running on the caliber 3185 automatic winding movement, it's really just a wonderful piece, and I look forward to covering it on the channel. So that watch was from 2004, and I'm going to move back to blue dials. And talk about a watch that was manufactured in 1969. And this watch is an Omega chronostop with a blue dial. It's the reference 146.009. If you don't know, Omega produced a really interesting Omega Genève called the chronostop, which is a 1-minute chronograph watch that they produced for several years. There's many different versions of these pieces. The 146.009 is a piece that runs on the caliber 920 manual wind movement. So you have your 1 minute chronograph counter, and you also have a date complication at 3 o'clock. The watch has this specific version of the watch has a stainless steel case that's in pretty good condition. Obviously signs of wear. The chronostops have fairly short lugs, and the lugs on this watch are sharp and in good condition. What really captures the moment for this specific watch is the really wonderful blue dial. It's in great condition. Applied hour markers, applied Omega logo. It also has an applied date window at 3 o'clock, which obviously makes the date stand out a little bit. And it's paired on this really nice blue strap, and I think is the perfect sort of segue into the warmer climates of the spring and obviously into the summer. An interesting bit of history for Omega. I'm excited to jump into that with you when we cover it on lifeonthewrist.com as well as on the Life on the Wrist YouTube channel. I think we've covered other chronostops before on Life on the Wrist, if I'm not mistaken. But it's nice to have one that has a blue dial and fits my personality, I think, to a T when it comes to what I look for in a watch. I think interesting complications. I love chronographs as well, but interesting complications. Blue dials are, I die for blue dials. So a really nice example. I am correct. I did cover another Omega chronostop on the channel. Let me see when we covered this. This was covered looks like we covered a version that had a gray dial, which was quite nice in steel with an orange chronograph hand. It was, I think, this one was, I think, how old was this one? Just trying to see when this variation came out. Anyway, slate gray dial, really nice orange chronograph hand, fits really nicely, and it's nice to have another chronostop on, being featured on the channel. So with that, I thank you for listening to this episode of the Life on the Wrist podcast. As always, if you want to discuss any of the things that we've discussed on this episode, be sure to send us a message on lifeonthewrist.com or one of our social media accounts. We'd love to chat with you about some of the topics that we've discussed. If you want to see more for any of the things that we discussed, as I mentioned throughout the podcast, there will be links in the show notes, so be sure to check that out so you can see the pictures of these watches, because obviously I can speak through them, but I think pictures allow you to engage a little bit more with each of these topics. I have said it, but if you want to check out our social medias, if you want more content from Life on the Wrist, be sure to check out the show notes. There'll be links to all of our social medias as well as our website and our YouTube channel. If you are feeling generous and wouldn't mind rating this podcast, it really does help me out and make sure it allows me to make episodes of this podcast and cover things that you want to hear on a weekly basis. So it really does help me out if you would rate this podcast. And if you are new, be sure to follow us and share this podcast with a friend who might be interested in watches. With that said, guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Life on the Wrist podcast, and until next time.